There are so many players who think they need to master heroes like Fanny, Cho or Gusion to become OP. This couldn't be further from the truth. Today, I will tell you which 10 heroes are easy to learn, yet super strong in the current meta, how you can maximize their potential, and good builds, emblems and spells for them, so you can use them as your entire hero pool to rank up to mythical glory in solo queue. If you have all the required macro skills of course, which you learn when you watch every ML guide here on ML Guide. Cringe line to make people subscribe to my channel? Check. These top 10 lists will become a thing here in the future, so let me know which top 10 list you wanna see next in the comments. Now let's start with the first hero, Balmond. Regular viewers expected that one, simply because I said it already multiple times before. Even after the nerf on his ultimate, he's still a super strong pick in almost every matchup. You can use him flexible either as a bulky jungler who can secure every turtle and lord with his old Raid combo, or as a strong XP laner who can hold his lane against any enemy, and act as a second tank who soaks up damage in the teamfights later on. As jungler, you have one huge benefit, which is his early game potential. This is the time where you can pick the enemy's marksman or assassin easily, deal a huge amount of damage to them, while they don't have the tools/items yet to really fight back. If the enemy has a CC skill that could stop you, make sure that they used it before you dash towards them with your first skill. Do your helicopter move and BAM! Finish them off with your ultimate, which deals true damage. So don't be afraid using it against tanks when they are low, especially because its damage scales with the lost HP of the enemy. High HP loss means higher damage. This early game dominance you can use to secure the turtles, which gives your whole team some sweet bonus gold and a shield, which is super useful when you fight against your counterpart on the lane. Balmond works the best when you have strong late game heroes as teammates, who can take over the domination part in the later game. This is where he struggles the most, simply because a whole team can easily stop his engage and helicopter move. You will act as a second punching bag for the enemies basically. But as long as your allies deal a good amount of damage, it's okay. The other job he fulfills is securing the Lord. As I already mentioned, his ability to use his ult together with his retribution spell gives you the chance to secure every Lord in basically every situation. Even in the 1v5 you can become the ultimate hero of the team by diving in and sacrificing your life for the team and the win. Here are the recommended builds, emblem and spells. As you can see, you should use a tanky build and a talent that lets you regen HP. You deal continuously damage, so you need to be able to sustain incoming damage for a longer time. Balmond also benefits as much from physical attack bonuses, so building many attack items won't increase your damage enough to give you sustainability away for it. Now you know why to pick him, but you also need to know when you should avoid picking him. If the enemies pick many heroes who can stop his helicopter move, which can be done by airborne effects from Leslie, Kadita or Vale for example, or suppression, frozen and transformation effects, you should avoid picking him, because without it, he's pretty much useless. He also struggles against high mobility heroes like Lancelot, Benefil,
What the hell is even that?
Bernadette or Fanny, because they can easily escape his helicopter move. Against those heroes you need to be clever and wait for your chance when their blink skills are on cooldown. Or you use another jungler who can counter these heroes perfectly, which is Saber. Saber is not only very easy to play, he has one ability that not many heroes share. You can take out any squishy enemy completely out of the game. The enemy picked a really strong marksman like 1-1 Clint or Beatrix and an OP assassin like Fanny, Gusion or Ling. Saber is the answer to both of them. His incredible damage to a single target, which is so easy to apply, stops them all. His combos are so simple that you should be able to remember them after one match. The first combo you use on enemies who lost some HP or who you can one-shot even with full HP. First, plus second, plus ult and an enhanced basic attack if necessary. You won't get a more simple combo than that. His basic attack gets enhanced when you use the dash from his second skill, which deals a good amount of damage and slows the enemy. Surprise the enemies from a bush of course, and make sure that your victim has no allies nearby. Also aim at the squishy enemies of course. Using it on a tank is the worst thing you can do. The second combo you can use when your enemies popped out their skills already or when they are already very low. First, plus second, plus basic attack, plus ult if necessary. This one you should use when you're sure that your enemies won't be able to fight back after your combo. In the worst case, use your ult to secure the kill. But usually you want to use this one to secure a free kill without wasting your ult. Now let's talk about his playstyle. First become level 4 as fast as you can and rotate first to the XP lane. You want to clear the XP laner first so you can take the first turtle for free. If the XP laner is a tank or bulky fighter though, rotate first to the gold lane to kill the enemy's marksman. The best rotation for Saber is clear the 2 buffs, Riki and one of the other small camps to become level 4. Make use of the AoE damage of his blades and clear Riki and the red buff together to save a bit of time. Ignore the Lethal Wanderer because Saber is really weak until he's level 4. You don't need any unnecessary trouble in the early game because it's super important for Saber to stay alive and get some early kills, so he's able to snowball. An underfarmed Saber is as useless as a tank layler, so better make sure to get some early kills than contesting this neutral objective. Afterwards, you follow the same pattern over and over again. This is what every jungler is supposed to do, by the way. Go to a side lane, preferable the gold lane, kill the enemy side laner, go back to your jungle and farm, go to the side lane where the turtle spawns, kill the enemy side laner or even the enemy's jungler, get the turtle, go back to clear your buffs again and repeat what you just did. Saber's ult has a cooldown of about 40 seconds, so your goal should be to kill at least one enemy every minute. After 8 minutes, you should have at least 8 kills, which are pretty good stats. In the late game it becomes more difficult for Saber of course, since the enemies are sticking together for the big ganks. There you have to pick up the strongest enemy, which is usually the marksman, and make sure to ruin their day completely. In this state you could die more often, but if you're able to trade your life with the enemy's marksman, it's a good trade usually. His build is also pretty simple. Here are the recommended builds, emblem and spells. His damage scales a lot with physical attack and physical penetration, so it's a no-brainer to use these items. As the very first item after your jungle boots, you should get Fury Hammer though, because the plus 12 physical penetration bonus increases your damage a lot against squishy enemies in the early game. As I mentioned though, he only works well against squishy enemies. If the enemy picked a lot of tanky heroes, you might want to use a hero that is able to kill tanks. For example, one of the former members of the 4 Marksmen of Doom squad, Leslie. After her revamp, she climbed up the popularity sheet and tier list, so you won't get any negative comments anymore when you pick her. There's only one thing you need to know about Leslie. Play it safe until you have your first 3 core items. If you want to be a good Leslie player, you need to have the patience of a monk. Clear wave after wave without missing any of them. Occasionally join the team fight, but always stay safe and just farm, farm and farm. This is the absolute basic to be a good Leslie player. Your time to shine comes in the late game, so you have to accept the fact that you're basically useless until the Lord first spawns. No, the first Lord spawns. Yeah. Once this happens, and you manage to get a kill or assist here and there, and hopefully didn't end the world hunger in the first 8 minutes, you will be able to kill any enemy with your insane true damage. You basically have to play hit and run with the enemy. Get your enemy in range, shoot, and run away again. Do this a couple of times, and the enemy is either dead or so low that they have to retreat, which is often enough to take an objective. There's no real combo for her, other than this one maybe, where you can use your enhanced basic attack 4 times in a row. You can use your second skill against a wall to quickly get your enhanced basic attack, or cancel your ult quickly. Here are the recommended builds, emblem and spells. The good thing about Leslie is that you can pick her in almost every matchup. Having a Saber, Eudora or Melissa against you will suck of course, but they will suck no matter which marksman you're playing. Now let's have a look at the other side lane, the XP lane. Here you need heroes who survive on their own even in a 1v3 situation. For this I would highly recommend the OP daddy Terisla, because as we all know, all daddies are completely OP in Mobile Legends. Fun fact, I'm a daddy as well. In the early game, you just bonk the enemy with your hammer to deal an insane amount of damage. Regen a lot of HP after you've built the Bloodlust Axe, and be the second tank of the team once the late game phase starts. There's no real combo for him that I could show you, because you use his skill situational. His passive gives him damage reduction the more HP he lost, his first skill slows his enemies and increases their movement speed, plus deals a nice extra damage based on the enemy's lost HP. With his second skill, you bonk the enemies 3 times, each bonk slowing the enemies by 20%, and his ult is one huge bonk into the the ground, which slows the enemies and pulls them towards the middle of the bonking area. So one combo could be ult plus first plus second plus second plus second. Terizla is quite slow, so it's hard catching dashing enemies with it. But since he's a bulky fighter, these dashing reds also almost deal no damage against him. Here are the recommended belts, emblems and spells. You can go for a more damage-orientated build if your team lacks the damage, for example if your jungler is a tank, or for a tank build if your team needs more sustainability. The option to be both is what makes him such a flexible pick on the XP lane, no matter who your enemy is. Talking about flexibility, having a hero that can fill multiple roles is always an advantage, because you don't have to adjust that often. But is there any hero that can perform well in multiple roles, is easy to play and strong in the current meta? The answer to this is Ruby. Ruby can be used as a strong XP laner with an insane regen potential, combined with the ability to CC the enemy basically non-stop, or as a tanky roamer who just stops the movement of her enemies. Similar to Terizla, she doesn't really have a combo, except her famous old flicker trick that I of course failed to demonstrate. Her first skill slows enemies and deals a good amount of damage. Her second skill stuns enemies and pulls them towards her, and her ult pulls all enemies towards her and stun them as well. Pretty simple. In the early game as XP laner, you build 2 vampire mallets to have a good amount of physical lifesteal. Why physical lifesteal? Ruby skills benefit from a physical lifesteal, and therefore it's very beneficial to build items that give you physical lifesteal instead of spell them. So physical lifesteal items like Harsh Claws, Endless Battle, or as mentioned Vampire Mallet are must-have items for her, so you can fully use her regen potential from a special physical lifesteal ability. By the way, you get a virtual cookie from me now if you can tell me how many times I just said physical lifesteal without skipping back. And my voice broke. The correct answer is 6 times. Back to the early game. As it's your job as XP laner, you make sure to stay alive to defend your lane and help your team to secure the first turtle. Afterwards, you stay in the epic 1v1 with your counterpart, where you don't die and maybe even kill that annoying bloke. Ruby can generally survive any matchup on the XP lane, so just play passive or aggressive depending on the enemy you have. Once the gank starts, you either act as a pure fighter who deals a lot of damage but also is able to survive thanks to her regen. You thought I would say physical lifesteal again, didn't you? Or if you build her more tanky, you deal less damage, but you're able to survive attacks from burst heroes. Her build is really dependent on the enemy's lineup, so you should have multiple build setups, which you can see here, as well as her spells and emblems. I don't need to explain them anymore because I pretty much did that already. So I need a transition for the next hero. Talking about burst heroes, we finally talk about a mid lane hero, Nana. Don't let her cute appearance fool you. Once she got her first few items, she's an absolute monster that can bully the enemies non-stop until they cry. In one of my recent solo queue to Mythic with all heroes videos, I was already talking a lot about Nana. So to avoid repeating myself too much, here's the short version. Molina has to sit in the bush non-stop, your first skill is made to poke the enemies non-stop, your ult is perfect to apply on enemies from a bush or in the middle of a chaotic gank, and your passive allows you to be more aggressive than with other mages, and is one of the reasons why I recommend her for newbies. If you've made a mistake and will die on the spot, her passive gives you a second chance that you usually only get with immortality. While your passive is on cooldown, you just have to be extra careful, and you shouldn't have many deaths in one game. One last general tip for all mid laners out there: make sure to rotate together with your jungler and roamer, and make sure to gank the side lanes, especially the gold lane, since you can easily kill the enemy squishy marksman. Now, we were talking already about one squishy marksman, which is Leslie, so I wanted to give you another option. I was thinking a lot which marksman I was going to recommend. I was thinking about Bruno, Irothel, Melissa, Brody and even Mia. But in the end, I decided to go for the opposite of Leslie, a marksman who deals damage with skills instead of basic attacks alone, which is the coolest cowboy since Lucky Luke, Clint. He's one of the strongest, if not the strongest marksman in the early game. Although, Popol is still stronger with his doggo.
What the dog doing?
Still, Clint has the ability to bully any other enemy away, thanks to his passive. Every time after you use the skill, his next basic attack is enhanced. This one has a very long range, so you can use it to poke your enemies multiple times in a row. If they come too close to you, you lock them down with your second skill and give them a nice bullet shower with your first skill. And your ult pokes the enemy even more. Once he builds Endless Battle and Berserker's Fury, his passive hits start to hurt like hell. The only thing that makes him weak is his mobility, which is really not the strongest. Burst heroes are also still a big problem for him, So being able to keep your head down is just as important as for Leslie. Still, you don't need to wait forever to become useful, which is also why he's the 5th most picked hero in higher mythic rank. Here's his build, emblem and spells. As the very first item you should build Azure Blade, which gives your next basic attack some additional true damage after every skill you used. This is perfect for the small poke from his enhanced basic attack, which is also why Endless Battle is your first core item, since it has the same effect but stronger. Now we are moving away from the damage dealer area and talk about the role so many players hate, the roamer/tank role. We already had Ruby, who can be a really great roamer, but we also need one pure tank in this list. I wanted to mention Grog first because he's a really strong tank, but I thought about which tank is more helpful in solo queue when you have headless chickens as your teammates. So I decided to go for Atlas, who can just suplex his enemies in front of his allies, so they are basically forced to attack them. Still, if you go for Grog as your main roamer, you do nothing wrong. Now to Atlas. His combo is pretty simple. Second skill to engage, flicker if available, hold your enemies towards your allies and slow them with your first skill. Afterwards your enemies are hopefully dead and you got a couple of assists. Or 28. If you're able to execute this combo very well, you can make a huge impact even as a roamer. Just make sure to not first pick him, because if the enemy pick Diggy, you can just stay in the base. And make sure your allies pick heroes who benefit from heroes being pulled together. If you have Hayabusa as jungler, he might not be the best option. Heroes with good AoE skills like Badang, Kadita, Helcurt, Odette or Claude are your best friends though. In the early game, you should support your jungler and mid laner as much as you can, so you can rotate together with them to the side lanes. Don't be a tank who just babysits the marksman. This strategy was already outdated in 2020, so please don't. You can rotate to your marksman whenever necessary, of course, but don't just dig on that lane. The early game is not his strongest phase, of course, simply because you can make ults where you catch all 5 enemies at once, but catching one enemy with your ult which leads to their death is already a success. Make use of your slows and stuns as much as you can and prepare for your time to shine in the late game. Also be aware that he's not the tankiest tank, especially after the recent nerfs, so you die pretty fast compared to other tanks if you're not careful. Engaging at the right time and retreating again at the right time is really important here, and something you learn from your previous mistakes. If you learn from your mistakes, of course. Damn, that would have been the perfect transition to my 7 deadly mistakes video that I've made a couple of months ago. But we're not done yet, because there are 2 more heroes to talk about. The first one is the mate you wanna use when you want to be able to carry the most headless chickens in solo queue, Sicilian. Now, Sicilian has no combo or complicated skills. When you play Sicilian, you want to master the art of farming your stacks, because this is what gives his first skill the insane damage. This is the only thing you're doing in the early game. So whenever you have a Sicilian as your ally, don't expect that he will gank your lane. He will be busy farming stacks so he can 2-shot your enemies in the late game. I will show you now how you can farm his stacks in the best way possible, since you want to farm non-stop. Running out of mana is really bad for you, so you have to manage his mana very well. In the early game, you use max 2 shots of his first skill and wait until it's resetted. Each shot you will use increase the mana usage, so you want to keep it as low as you can. You also try to last hit the minions so you receive more gold. As first item you build Demon Shoes and Enchanted Talisman. These items help you greatly to recover enough mana, so you can start to spam around your skills much more often. Keep your mana at 25% minimum, so you're never a sitting duck who can't use any skill. Also make use of your ultimate whenever possible. Just torture the small camp or even the buff of your junglers a bit, without clearing them, of course, since you don't want to steal their farm. You only do that to get more stacks. The further the match progresses, the faster you can collect stacks, because of your higher mana and items. You can use your ult and first skill on the Lord to farm stacks, for example. If you keep farming and farming without dying, you can get up to 800 stacks in 20 minutes. Or 480 if you're not a Sicilian main like me who's still trying to figure it out. Still, you can deal an insane amount of damage with it, and even steal a Lord here and there. Your positioning is really important though. If you're too aggressive, you can get easily killed. So staying at the backline all the time and avoid that any enemy is coming near to you is a must. Especially when your enemies is playing a hero like 𝐁𝐻𝐻𝐵. Why I explained in my video where I show you why 𝐁𝐻𝐻𝐵 is the strongest early game jungler in the game and how you can make your enemies throw the game in under 5 minutes. See you over there!